Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. At the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin criticized China over issues such as the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs responded by saying that the U.S. should not play with fire. On Sunday, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that Lloyd Austin ignored the calls from regional countries for peace and development, promoted a Cold War mentality of bloc confrontation, sneered and attacked China, and hyped up the so-called China threat theory in a provocative and inflammatory manner. China is strongly dissatisfied with and firmly opposes this, and has lodged a stern protest with the U.S. side. The spokesperson said that, in fact, the United States is the real hegemonic power in the world and the biggest factor undermining peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region. To maintain its own hegemony, the U.S. pushes its so-called Indo-Pacific strategy, deploys offensive weapons in the South China Sea, stirs up trouble in the Asia-Pacific region, and creates tensions, effectively turning the Asia-Pacific into a powder keg and causing deep concern among regional countries. The spokesperson also said that the Taiwan issue is purely China's internal affair and no foreign country has the right to interfere. The U.S. should not harbor any illusions about using the Taiwan issue as a bargaining chip to contain China and should not play with fire. China urges the U.S. to genuinely abide by the One China principle and the three China-U.S. joint communiques and to stop supporting and encouraging Taiwan independence forces. There has never been any problem with freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea. China has always insisted on properly handling differences regarding the South China Sea through dialogue and consultation with the relevant countries, and firmly safeguards its territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests in accordance with the law and regulations. It is the United States that is the biggest factor undermining peace and stability in the South China Sea. China urges the U.S. to genuinely respect the efforts of regional countries to maintain peace and stability, to stop deliberately undermining the regional environment of peace and stability, to stop hyping up conflict and confrontation, and to stop escalating tensions in the region. On May 31st, during the first plenary session of the 22nd Shangri-La Dialogue, Kegersais delivered a speech lasting over 30 minutes. Besides lavishly praising Trump and flattering his boss, he also spent a significant portion of his speech talking about the so-called threat China poses to regional countries. It is worth noting that in his remarks, Kegersais referred to China as Communist China. Zhou Bo, a researcher at the Center for International Security and Strategy at Tsinghua University, believes that this shows that cabinet members in Trump's current administration are even more ideologically driven than any previous U.S. Secretary of Defense who has spoken at the Shangri-La Dialogue, and their confrontational stance also surpasses that of the previous Biden administration. De Wei, director of the Center for International Security and Strategy at Tsinghua University, believes that Kegersais' remarks about all the countries present being threatened and humiliated by China are highly provocative from China's perspective. However, he believes that saying these things was Kegersais' own choice. He thinks it is inappropriate for the U.S. Secretary of Defense to directly attack China at such a security forum. De Wei also pointed out that while senior U.S. military officials want Asia-Pacific countries to cooperate with the U.S. in dealing with the main regional threat, China, at the same time, they impose tariffs on countries in the region, hinder economic development, and ask them to increase spending to help the U.S. share security responsibilities. The credibility of such signals is greatly diminished. In any case, there is no point in meeting with Kegersais when he makes such openly hostile remarks. No wonder senior PLA officials are not attending this year's Shangri-La Dialogue. As for the United States, with anti-China politicians dominating the political scene in Washington, the best way for China to respond is to become bigger and stronger, surpass the U.S. in every aspect, and let its strength do the talking. Recently, an article from a U.S. conservative online media outlet expressed concern about China and the U.S. competing on another front. The article is titled "China's Rise in Biotechnology Spurs the U.S. to Catch Up." According to the article, in recent years, multiple sources have shown that China has already become a key force in global pharmaceutical research and development. Not only has China surpassed the U.S. in the annual number of registered clinical drug trials, but the scale of laboratories under construction is also far ahead. It is understood that this is exactly what's attracting major international pharmaceutical companies to invest more R&D funding in China, which has caused significant concern among U.S. politicians. According to Axios News, data shows that in 2024, China registered over 7,100 types of clinical trials on the World Health Organization's International Clinical Trials Registry platform, while the US had about 6,000. Global Data, a data analysis and consulting firm based in London, UK, also recently stated that their analysis found the number of ongoing clinical trials in China has been continuously increasing over the past few years, and has now surpassed the United States. The report cited a study released this April by CBRE, a U.S. commercial real estate services company, which pointed out that by the end of 2024, the area of laboratories and R&D centers under construction in Beijing and Shanghai reached 7.4 million and 6.4 million square feet respectively, surpassing other markets worldwide. Boston in the United States ranked third, with 3.9 million square feet, but the gap is quite significant. The CBRE report also found that although the United States still leads the world in the number of patent applications in the fields of biotechnology, pharmaceuticals, and medical technology, China is catching up at a pace unmatched by any other major country. Since 2014, the number of pharmaceutical and medical technology patents in China has increased by 379%. In comparison, among major countries, South Korea ranks second in patent growth speed, with a growth rate of 134% over the past decade. According to Axios News, this shows that Chinese biotech companies have gradually shifted from the early model of imitating American technology to produce generic drugs, to becoming developers of original new drugs. These new drugs have the potential to take a leading position in areas such as cancer and autoimmune diseases. The report points out that this shift has attracted a growing number of licensing agreements for experimental drugs from China, as well as significant new investments from multinational pharmaceutical giants like Pfizer, GlaxoSmithKline, Sanofi, and Novartis. Investment bank Stifel Financial even predicts that this year, as much as 37% of the licensed drugs from major pharmaceutical companies will come from China. A few years ago, this proportion was only 12%, while in 2023 and 2024 it was around 30%. Eckart, executive vice president of Bayer Group in Germany, said that overall, Chinese biotech companies are becoming increasingly competitive. In December last year, Bayer set up Shanghai Bayer Com.net in Zhangjiang, Shanghai, to incubate local startups. Simeon George, CEO of SR1, a biotech venture capital firm with offices in both London and California, recalled to the Wall Street Journal in the US that as early as 2010, he once had the opportunity to invest in the Chinese startup Beijing, but ultimately gave up due to uncertainty about the prospects of cooperation. Now, this company has transformed into a global enterprise with a market value of up to $30 billion. George said this was the biggest miss of his career. But now, SR1 has developed a comprehensive China strategy. What they need are deals that make sense in terms of value, and the value proposition currently offered by China is extremely attractive. According to Axios News, a typical example of the rise of Chinese biotech is when, last autumn, the American biotech company Submit Therapeutics announced that the cancer immunotherapy drug they licensed from Akeso in China outperformed Merck's blockbuster drug in late-stage lung cancer patients. The report said that some people have even compared this breakthrough to the shock that Chinese AI startup DeepSet brought to Silicon Valley. China's development in the field of biotechnology has also caught the attention of American politicians. Last month, the National Security Commission on Emerging Biotechnology submitted a report to Congress, warning that China is surpassing the U.S. in advanced biotechnology. Washington needs to invest significant resources over the next 5 years to prevent this shift in power. The report also stressed that there is still time to take action, but there isn't much time left to waste. Scott Gottlieb, who served as the commissioner of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration during Trump's first term, wrote an article earlier this month urging the U.S. government to take action to streamline the FDA's regulatory procedures in order to lower the cost of drug development in the U.S. and maintain America's global leadership in biomedicine. Gottlieb wrote that when American manufacturers obtain drug licenses from China, they are actually diverting funds that could have supported local innovation hubs like Boston, Kendall Square, and North Carolina's Research Triangle. The U.S. biotechnology industry was once the envy of the world, but if we're not careful, every drug in the future could end up being made in China. Some analysts in the U.S. believe that breakthroughs like Akeso's are not just a flash in the pan, but are actually the result of China's long-term national strategy in the biopharmaceutical sector. An article published this March by the Washington think tank, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, pointed out that over the past few years, Chinese government agencies have completely transformed the regulatory ecosystem, strengthened the intellectual property framework, and provided massive support for both basic and applied research, enabling China to make significant progress in biopharmaceutical innovation. As a result, many experts are concerned that the Trump administration's cuts to funding for the National Institutes of Health and Biomedical Research at universities could cause the U.S. to fall even further behind in drug development. Over the past decade, American entrepreneur Celiac Letting, who has been closely following China's biotechnology industry, told Axios News that while China has not yet surpassed the U.S. as the biotech superpower, the U.S. must remain highly vigilant. In conclusion, if the Trump administration continues to intensify politicization and reinforce the America First ideology, it will scare away top-tier researchers from around the world. For example, extreme policies targeting international students, especially rejecting Chinese students, will only make the U.S. increasingly isolated, and its research in various fields will gradually fall behind China.